Hello and welcome to another episode of my studio workshop series. In this episode I'm going to show you how I made my version of the Gun Anthem, which is part of my Synthesizer Legends Volume 1 album. On that album and all my studio albums so far, I've used only analog synthesizers and analog drum machines for making the music on the album. So I will show you what synthesizers I used, which sounds I picked, and how I built up the arrangement, how I mixed the song and recorded it and eventually mastered it in that particular order, because in my workflow I mix most of the song before I record anything. And this is possible because I built up my studio so that I can use my analog synthesizers like they were VST instruments. So I have a digital mixer that they all run through, and I control them by MIDI using Cubase, my DAW. And that way I can play with almost the final sounds, and it has an enormous impact on how I play, and makes me much more creative, I think. If you haven't done so already, you can check out my studio workflow video, which works as an introduction to the setup in my studio, how everything is connected, and my workflow in a nutshell, basically. So please check out that first and then come back here. So you may ask yourself, how does a guitar-driven song fit on a synthesizer album? Well, I asked myself that question because this song just started popping into my brain while I was working on the album, and I thought it would be so fun to do this song because it's one of the songs I remember from my childhood, and somehow I always connected it to, I don't know, synthesizers, and I don't know quite why, because it's really guitar driven. I mean, the whole song is basically based on a guitar lead. And so I started to read about the song, and then I realized that it's actually Harold Faltermeyer who has composed the song. And he is a legendary synthesizer composer, you could say. For instance, XLF and many other movie themes he has made, which have been really synthesizer driven. So then I was like, okay, then I'm safe. Then this song can definitely be placed on a synthesizer album. So the first thing I did was I imported the song into Cubase and I started analyzing it. So I split it up into different sections, and then I started to identify the different parts of the song, and I put different colors depending on what the song part is. It starts with an A part. The A part is also used as an introduction. At some point the A part gets a modulation and a bit variation at the same time, and then it goes back to the original. Then there is a B part where a piano is introduced. So there is no guitar lead at that point, so it kind of plays against the guitar. And then the A part is repeated, this time with power drums, you could call them, really like 80s type of rock drums. And then the B part comes again, also with heavy drums. And then we have a C part, which is the guitar solo. And after that, we have a B part again, which is the ending of the solo. And then we go back to the melody without the A part melody without any drums. And there is some small variations, but otherwise it's basically the A part that the song ends on. So here's the basic A part. It goes in C major. Except the D sharp through A sharp in the end. And then the whole A part is modulated and we continue in F sharp. And the last chord is A major with E in the bass. And that makes it possible for us to go back to C major, where the A part ends with. So that's the basic A part. That pad sound I made with the Alpha Juno 2, and the Phantom is now controlling that synth. And that pad sound runs throughout the whole song. And although I can control it through Aftertouch, which I now routed to the mode wheel, so I can control the filter. But I don't use it at all, because in the arrangement, the original arrangement, the pad is just the same sound and throughout the whole song. So I thought, okay, let's keep it like that. But then there are additional kind of string sections which support the pad and adds depth and dynamics to different parts of the song. And that string section is provided by the Oberheim expander. In the beginning, I use one sound, and I use it as the string drone, really in the beginning. And then when we go to the modulated A part, then it starts to play kind of like a string section. Like that, and then it builds up. So the first A and B part has different drums than the rest of the song. Only the hi-hat stays the same throughout the song. And the intro pattern sounds like this. And that loops then. So there is a lot of delay, as you can hear. So there's a ping-pong delay, and I think this is applied to almost all the basic drums. Let me remove the delays and listen to the pattern without any delay. So quite a simple pattern. But the rhythmical delay really makes the sound of that. So I'm using two different delays. One is a ping-pong delay in 16th notes. So with only that delay on, it sounds like this. That's already basically the song. But then I added a second delay. And let me remove the first delay. It's a dotted 8th note, I think, and it's more of a modulation delay, which had quite a nice ring to it, I thought. It sounds like this. So it kind of gives this, how to say, it adds kind of a rhythmical element. So together, having those two delays makes this makes this rhythm, I would say. The kick drum, the snare drum, and the toms are from my TR-808. Let's just solo those three and listen to it. Except for the reverbs and the delays, there is very little processing on them. So on the bass drum I have some EQ, I have a multiband compressor, but no ordinary compressor. On the snare drum I have just a bit of EQ on, and on the toms I have an EQ on and a compressor. And the reverbs are a bit of M200i room reverb, a bit of a Lexicon MPX hall reverb, and a bit of the X32's internal room reverb. The tom and the bass drum uses the same reverbs, it's just a bit different mix of these. The intro hi-hat I made with the analog rhythm, and it sounds like this. but of course it should have some delay on. So let me put the delays back on. Then you get this rhythmic effect. I was also considering using the 808 hi-hat. Let me see, where is it? Here it is. But I wanted to have it even more kind of subdued. And this analog rhythm hi-hat, that pattern continues throughout the song. But then when the rock drums enter, then we also needed kind of a real hi-hat. And then I added the 808 hi-hat for that. The cymbals for the song I made with the 808 cymbal and then with the DRM1's cymbal. And mostly I use them together, yeah. So the arrangement of my version is basically identical to the original. The main change is that I continue the song a bit further in the end. It basically just goes on the A part. And then also in the introduction and throughout the song, I chose to take the bass from the composer's cut version of the song. That version doesn't have a lead at all, so it was nice to use for picking out the string arrangement. And it also has a 16th note bass. And I took that idea from there and used it in my version. So it basically sounds like this. That's the hypersynth xenophone that I used for the bass. I really liked how it sounds like. Let's put on the drums as well. So that's the bass, and very little processing on that sound, some equalization, and it goes through a dual Fair compressor. I think it's a Fairchild compressor, I guess, an emulation of that. Has some reverb, very little reverb. And it's not every day that you get to use a church bell in an arrangement. That's a fantastic analog church bell from the Roland JX8P. I think it's, I seem to have done some modification to the sound, but it's really close to the preset church bell that you can find in the unit. I did only a bit of equalization on that. I added a high shelf around 1.5 kHz and upward to boost the higher frequencies. And there is a lot of the MPX1 reverb as well. A bit of the Big Sky reverb and a bit delay as well. And even a bit of room reverb. But even if we take all these away, it's still really nice. Then we start to have all the elements we need for the A part. But we still don't have the melody. That comes here. So that's the main lead, and that's the guitar sound that is used throughout the song as the main lead of the song. And there is also a solo section during the C part. And then we have this guitar sound and at the same time a comping guitar. This is made using the Korg Poly-61. And this is the same sound that I use in Crockett's theme, and I use it more or less also in Flight of the Navigator. And it's the Poly-61 driven through a Sansamp GT2. So without the Sansamp, it sounds like this. but it works somehow. And the reason is that there are two oscillators slightly beating against each other. So there are two main components that are important to this sound. The first thing I would say is the resonance of the filter. It's at a midway up right now. If I put it all the way up, I can't really hear the resonance there. But it's midway up, and that makes a movement in the sound, which kind of emulates a naturally decaying note, I would say. And then there is a second element, and that is the oscillators are slightly detuned against each other. So let me turn up the sustain to maximum. And let me actually take away the resonance as well, and let me put the filter to maximum so we don't have any other things happening. You can hear there is still like small movement in the sound which comes from the detuning. If we raise the detuning, but now it's at its minimal. So the detuning and the resonance falling with the filter, that really makes it sounding like a kind of a guitar-ish, and these properties of the sound is then amplified through the Sunsamp, which is a guitar amp, actually an analog guitar amp modular, and that makes up the sound. You probably also noticed that I'm using a foot pedal for controlling the Poly-61, and I'm playing on the Phantom and not on the Poly-61. And there is a reason for this. The reason is that the Poly-61 is retrofitted with a third-party MIDI kit, and this MIDI kit enables pitch bend through MIDI, but that pitch bend is not actually like a normal pitch bend. It's rather kind of like a stepped glissando if you listen to it. And at first I didn't like it at all, but then when I was thinking about what instrument to use for this song, I was actually considering some MPE instrument perhaps, because I felt that this wasn't expressive enough. But then I realized that actually this technique with the pitch bend from the MIDI retrofit you can emulate how a guitar player makes like long glissandos on the neck. And then when I realized that, I was like, okay, this is the way to go. And the only thing which is a bit weird with it is you can do the pitch bend when you play on a MIDI keyboard, but when I play on the Poly-61, the pitch bend has no effect. That's just how the MIDI retrofit works. So if I want to use that pitch bend, I need to play on a separate keyboard. So that's why I have two keyboards in the music video. And then instead of using the pitch bend, because I rather use the Poly-61 pitch bend for doing like small like semitone pitch bends, and also of course vibrato. So then I connected a pedal to my Phantom, and I set the pedal to work as a pitch down, or is it pitch up? So then I can emulate this glissando technique. So I have to lift it up so that you can see it. And let me hold this note down. So that's essentially what I'm doing on the floor with my foot. It's a bit difficult to control when I'm sitting down. That's why it doesn't sound as good as it does on the record. But this way I can really like play more expressively. And I also use it just for to add a bit of extra attack to the note. So I just kind of stomp on the pedal to the bottom and press the note a bit before that. That makes like a really nice attack, and also this release portion in the end. But it's a bit difficult to control. It's easier to do when you stand up. But anyway, so that's with these different weird elements, I got together all I needed for the melody for the whole song, and also for making the solo part. After the sound samp, the Poly-61 goes through a noise gate, because having a lot of overdrive on makes it quite noisy. Not that bad today, for some reason. And an equalizer after that, where I cut off everything below 100 Hz, and I boost a bit around the mid-range. And then I send it to the Lexicon reverb, and 2 different delay lines, I think actually even 4 different delay lines, some room reverb and a bit of a plate reverb. Main delay is a ping pong delay, which is quite dark, so I've cut off quite a lot above, starting above like 1-2 kilohertz, so most of the top of that is off. So let me take away the other delays. Actually, let me take away the reverbs as well, and only listen to this delay sound. So it's a bit like, almost like a reverb, because it's so dull. So when we add on then the other delay lines first, and then the reverbs. Then we get the final sound. So then we have everything ready for the A part. And then we come to the B part. So that's the B part. The piano in the B part is composed of many different layers, 3 different synths. So first we have the Polybrute, which sounds like this. And then we have Marion Pro Synth, sorry, actually Marion MSR2. I used the MSR2 instead because it has more power. It has twice the polyphony of the Pro Synth, and I wanted to have this in a layer. So what I did was in an octave layer. So here's the Marion without, just as a single layer. And then I add a second layer of the Marion. So I'm controlling Marion, but I'm putting it on 2 tracks, and one of the tracks is transposed in an octave. So then it sounds like this. So it's the same synth, I'm just controlling it, kind of double controlling it, using 2 different tracks in my DAW. One of the tracks is transposed in an octave. And then together they sound like this. so you get a really full and nice sound. But then in addition, on top of that, I'm adding kind of only the melody part using my Poly-61. So a much simpler layer with less notes, and then I combine all these. It's actually done in many tracks because I can't even remember what I did, but I kind of selected which octaves I play for which synths and which notes I play with which synths to kind of make it as optimal as possible, I guess. And the final result sounds like this. But we need one more new element for the B part, and that's we are introducing a timpani, and that timpani sounds like this. And believe it or not, but that's made with an alpha Juno, and it's close to the preset that you can find in the unit. So I just edited the preset a bit, and that's what it sounds like. There is of course some processing on it. Let's see what I have. A lot of lexicon reverb, a bit of delay as well, and then I also have quite a lot of EQ on it. I have a compressor on it, and I have also a wave design, a transient design. And that transient designer adds mainly attack to the sound. So then we have the B part. But we also need drums, because now when we go back to the A part, then we will have proper rock drums. So the bass drum, snare and toms are made with the Jomox Airbase drum machine. And they sound like this. So really powerful rock drums, and I probably used most of the reverb that I ever used on any drums, but it just worked for this song, and it just needed that much. I mean, even the kick has a lot of reverb on it. So let's see what I did to the sounds. First starting with the, well, basically I have the same settings on the instruments that I use on almost all my mixes, more or less. I have the same chain basically. So the kick goes through a multiband compressor, but before that it goes through an ordinary compressor and an equalizer. And without the reverbs, let's take those away first. And without the dynamics, without the EQ, and without the multiband compressor, it sounds like this. So not as interesting. We add the EQ, add the dynamics, add the multiband, and add the reverbs, then it's quite different. The reverb comes mainly from the M200i. I think actually that I said it was a room reverb, but I think it's a gated reverb. Yeah, it sounds more like a gated reverb. And the snare has also mainly the M200i as giving the reverbs. So there are two types of gated reverbs. First one, without any reverbs, it sounds like this. And with the reverbs, so quite a different sound. Starting from scratch with the sound, snare sounds like this. And that goes through a noise gate and then an equalizer. Already makes a lot to the sound. Then we go to a compressor. That adds a bit sustain to the sound. And then as a final element we add a wave designer, a transient designer on, which adds a bit more attack. Without it and with it. Not much, really subtle difference. And then in the end the reverbs. It was already almost there with the first M200 gated reverb. Very similar settings for the toms. On the reverbs at least. On the channel, I think it looks quite similar as well, going through a noise gate. And then before going through the equalizer, we add a transient designer. Without it, with it. And then equalization without EQ and with EQ, and then compressor without and with, and the same thing for the low tom. And again, I only have two. I only have a high tom and a low tom. So for making multiple toms, I'm sending out CC data, tuning the toms. So for instance, here I have, I think I have 6 different high toms just by tuning it. And then I have, again, I think 6 different low toms. So, yeah. Have a big drum set just using 2 toms. So in addition to the new drums, there is also a higher string section being introduced the second time the A part comes. And for this string sound, or for this string section, I chose a different string sound on the Oberheim expander, and it sounds like this. And together with the whole. So this song is full of really nice string arrangements, I think. So after the A part, we come to the B part again, this time with the heavy drums on, and it's actually nothing new except for the drums and the timpanis. But then after that, we come to a C part, where the solo comes. So in the C part there is one Poly-61 accompanying the solo, and the chords go like this. roughly like that. I did it in several takes and I overdubbed with MIDI these. I think I did something like that even, to kind of simulate when a guitar player plays with a muted chord on the guitar. And then I play the chords on top of that. There is one new element as well, and that is the clap from the 808. That comes in now and then. And this is only during the C part. So the solo I recorded in many different takes to get it as good as possible, and then I edited the bass takes together. But roughly it goes something like this. Right, but I realized one thing, and that is that the release is now too short. I actually, on the sound, I had the release quite long, something like this. Let's try again. It's too long. Again. Roughly like that. But let's take it one more time anyway, and slowly, in case somebody else would like to try this solo, because I tried to pick it note by note from the original, and this is what I came up with. And slowly it goes like this, roughly. Sorry. This is difficult to take slowly. So roughly like that. That's the C part and the end of the solo. So then we come to the final A part, which is basically just the main melody and the A part going through until the end, and then but there are some odd chords as a turnaround, or how to call it. Really Christmassy. And then there is another melody coming in, a kind of a double melody on the Poly-61. So there you have it, that's the whole song. I did some mixer automation with the help of MIDI CC signals. So these tracks control the digital mixer. It's mainly the expander strings, the volume of those, and then all the 808 drums fade away when the second A part starts. So I needed to do an adjustment of that, and so I only needed one CC signal. I put all those 808 drums under one fader, one DCA. So that helps with that. Then the DCA controls, well, basically any fader you want to. And that's a quite fast way of doing it. Instead of having to automate several tracks, then you just assign them. I think you can see the assignment here. Let me see. Yes. Here you can see the number 1 here indicates that those are part of DCA number 1. The small 2 here, you can see those are part of DCA number 2. And DCA number 2 is the fresh air, I call it. It's this basically the jingle bells, the Marion and the, let me see now, Marion was one synth, and oh yes, the Polybrute is the other synth for the jingle bells. Then I'm also automating the level of the Poly-61 a bit, but really little actually. And then also the level of the Alpha Juno 2, which is the pad. But very little automation for this song, because this is anyway a rock song. Well, that was the whole arrangement. Then when everything was mixed like it is now, then I recorded the whole mix. But I didn't record it onto a stereo track. I recorded as stems. So I recorded, I group like some synths together, some rhythmic elements together. So I record basically the kick separately, the snare separately. I think I had the toms separately. And from the drums, I'm sending out to a stereo bus. So this stereo bus is basically all the toms, timpanis, kick and snare. And these become really compressed together, and it's basically parallel compression, it's called. So I send them out to a stereo bus where they are compressed really heavily, squashed down, and then I just lift that channel a bit in the mix and usually boost the bass and the treble a bit of that channel. And that makes the drums kind of sound even more rock. And it kind of gels them together, and you also get out kind of these high frequencies more evenly, and low frequencies as well, I think. And that really sounds nice. In addition to that drum bus, I have also the bass separately. And then I'm running out of channels. So I basically just bunch together the rest of the synths and the percussion elements into a stem I call rest. And then I have also all the effect returns are on a separate track, stereo track, so that I can adjust. If I think that the reverb is too much or something, then I can just adjust the whole level of the effect returns as a bus. Then I did one overdub, and an overdubbed Marion synth that sounds like this. So just for the end, I wanted to emphasize the melody, because I thought that there were too many chords. The melody didn't come through that well. So then I did one overdub with that. But that's basically it. So normally when the mix is recorded, I start mastering it. But this time I wanted to make it even more difficult, or actually even more fun, and I added a separate analog submixing step. And this is what I did. So this song was quite complex to mix because it has this slow part in the beginning, and later on it gets more intense, and even the drums changes from like soft 808 type drums to more kind of power rock type of drums, and there is a lot of things happening. So let's bring up back the mix. This time I'm using for the intermediate session, I'm using an analog mixer that I'm driving all the channels through. And let's listen to what it sounds like. So first, just bring in the kick. This is in the beginning of the song. And I'm not sure if I have even anything on the snare. So let's go a bit forward where we have more things happening. So here we have the new, the louder kicks and snares entering, and then I have bass on the third channel, and I have I have toms and the timpanis, and I might have other rhythm section instruments on 5 and 6. No, actually I think I only have toms and timpanis here, and then I have kind of the rest of the rhythm section and synths on 7 and 8, and then I have a stereo channel of the melody on 9 and 10, and I have the solo I think on 11 and 12, but we don't have a solo right now. But then the return channel for the rest of the instruments is on channel 13 and 14. Frankly, it sounds quite good already. But I have done quite a lot of things to it. If you are interested in finding out what's the differences between analog and digital summing, at least with my gear I realized that there is hardly any difference if you just take like exactly the same levels and mix them together and compare the mixes. You can check out my previous Power Run workshop video, and then I have the Oxygen 4 workshop video. In those two, I'm actually really trying to compare the difference between the digital mixing in Cubase and the analog mixing in Mackie. But I'm going to skip those parts now, and let's concentrate on the song, and let's see what I've done to it. So first of all, I did quite a lot of used quite a lot of equalizers and plugins already in Cubase. So there's quite a lot here. As you can see, there's a lot of channels where it says P61. This is because there are the different takes of the Poly-61 melody and later the Poly-61 solo. So there is I did some minor equalization on the solo part, and I also for the bass I think I did some dynamic equalization. I actually wanted to raise a bit around 125, and in addition on a drum bass. Here you can see the equalizer curves in general and everything. So it's quite a lot of things happening already before going to the analog mixer, because I'm only using the analog mixer for adding kind of flavors to the sound. So all kind of more precise corrective stuff I tend to do in Cubase. So for the parallel drum bass, I put eventually on a CLI-76 compressor and a clone of the same Pultec EQ clone that I have in the rack. This is for the heavily compressed drum bass. On the return channel again, I have some widening on the return, just to get that stereo spread on the mix. Then there is also a lot of automation going on. For instance, for all these guitar slides, I dip the volume a bit, because normally when you play on a guitar, when you do something like slides and stuff, you don't have as full volume on as like when you're playing a note. So I wanted to kind of emulate that to make it more feel like kind of a guitar. So let's listen to what that sounds like. It really feels more natural when you get these volume dips and you get a bit more dynamics. Here I even enhanced or kind of wanted to have the beat, downbeat a bit stronger. So the first note was a bit stronger there. So there's like, there's always a lot of work going into this. I think roughly, if I mean from scratch to finish, I probably end up using something like 70, 80 hours per song, I guess. So yeah, a lot of work. But it feels like it's worth it. I don't know. I hope to get better at this, so I hope that it will go faster and faster. And I think when doing this album, I felt like that I got better and faster. And the last song was probably the one that took the least amount of time. So yeah, let's hope the trend continues. So let's see what I did on the analog side. First of all, I really wanted the kick to be a bit beefier. It's a bit lacking right now. So I added a tube equalizer. I added as an insert on the kick channel. And I started to boost the low end around 60 hertz. That's what I was searching for. And also cutting it a bit. I'm dialing it a bit back because I still haven't done the master EQ. So let's listen to the master EQ and see what to do there. So I just would like to add a bit of bass in general. I set to 60 hertz. The mid is fine. A bit boost on the top end. I have it at 16 kilohertz right now. Perhaps a bit too much top end. And that's it. Then let's engage the compressor, the bus compressor. As I said in previous videos also, I like to have the transformers engaged. And in previous videos I've shown you how I normally tend to loop one bar and listen to the one bar only and then set the master bus after that. But we're going to skip that now because it's been repeated so much. So for this song I wanted to have, or I ended up using a quite high attack ratio, about 10, because I felt that was needed in order not to squash the dynamics too much. So let's raise the threshold, so that something's happening. Yeah, as you can hear, if you have too fast attack, it will eat up basically the attack of all the instruments. So it's much nicer in this song where so much is happening to have more attack. Ratio on to release. I think I ended up with a quite fast release setting, probably 0.3. And again, a high-pass filter on the side chain at 105 to not have it respond so much to the kick. So that's roughly the sound, the main sound. And then let's see what I did with the rest. So yeah, I already mentioned the kick. The kick was otherwise nice in the high end, I think. Yeah, but it's lacking a bit. Yeah, I think I probably had it louder as well. And this is more like it, perhaps cutting a bit more. And I think I had a high mid boost as well, around 3 or 4. Okay, let's engage the EQs. Yeah, so there it comes. I'm cutting also all the low frequencies below 75 for the effect returns, for the melody instruments, not for the tom channel and not for the bass channel and not for the snare either, because I want to have the low end of the snare here. And again, I boosted the mid of the bass. Let's take a section where you can hear the bass better, because the low mid boost here is really nice and it works really nice for the bass. So I boosted it. 250 is too low, but if you go to 350, perhaps a bit lower, somewhere between here, a really nice sound. And to compensate for that, I think I took it down a bit, the same region roughly, on the return channel, on the synth channel. Sorry, not the tom channel, the synth channel. And on the kick channel as well, but the kick again I took around 250. Perhaps a bit more boost in the bass. The toms might be a bit too high here now. But the toms also I added. Let's take some section with toms. Let's take this section here. Now I'm boosting the mid of the toms. Something around, might even had it at 250, I think. Not much, just a bit boost to get them come better through. And it might be that that sounds quite nice. They're a bit too loud now, but okay. So this is the solo section. I felt that the bass is now quite okay, but I still wanted something. So I thought about adding some sort of distortion plugin, but I didn't find anything that was fitting. So what I did was I decided to, what about if I would use the gain on the Mackie? So what I did is I take out from the direct out on the bass channel. I take out a lead and put it into line in on the 4th channel. So I get like an extra channel to work with. And what I did on that channel, I boosted the gain quite a lot. Let's put it and play in the solo. And we can even solo the bass to start with, so we can hear what's happening. So this is without anything, but then I'm adding the 2nd channel and I'm boosting the gain. Okay, this potentiometer is a bit bad, but now it's really it's really clipping now, but it's a surprisingly nice sound. It's like a distortion effect. And what I do is the high frequencies of that is a bit nasty, so I take them down. I take the low frequency down as well. I even low cut it because I have the low coming from the main bass channel, so I just want the kind of the distorted sound, and I boost the mid frequencies as well. Let's repeat that. So just to really like that, to drive out the kind of the bass, overdriven bass sound. But then I take it down, of course, so it's not that loud. So let's listen to the whole mix first without. And with it. Boost it a bit. This without. And now it's on. It lifts a bit, so it really worked nicely. So and yeah, this is part of the fun things to do with an analog mixer. So yeah, I probably did some small changes, further changes on the analog side, but this is more or less what I did. And then I recorded it to a stereo track and started to master it. So this turned out to be quite a tricky master as well. I started to notice that there were again some nastiness happening in the high frequencies. So, and especially during the snares, it has something to do, I think, with the snare reverb. It might have something to do with that I'm like artificially widening the stereo image of the snare, or it might be that I'm just noticing it better when it's like spread in a stereo field. And So what I did was I put a de-esser on. It reacts to the drum hits. But I felt that this was what was needed, because the problematic here was about 9500 and the de-esser works really nicely here. I did do some further equalization on the track. Not much, I think. Yeah, here I'm having an automation, and what the automation does is that let me check. Yeah, so it's towards the end. I had a problem with yeah, so here you can hear the sustaining strings were a bit too bright. They had quite a lot of like high frequency stuff that wasn't actually needed there. It has to do with the Oberheim's filter, because there was a special type of filter used. Not sure, some kind of bandpass filter, I guess. So it sounds a bit strange at some settings. So what I did was, when it comes to that section, I have an automation here that dips down, and you can see that it basically dips down the high frequencies. And then it takes them back up, not to cut off the tail too fast and kind of extend the tail a bit. And yeah, that works really nicely, I think. Again, I'm using the Soothe, because there's a lot of things happening here, a lot of clashing frequencies, especially in the higher registers. Somehow I noticed that when using analog synths, at least some of the analog synths sometimes get like weird phasing problems, like the Poly-61, and the phasing problem is because sometimes it double triggers. I don't know why, but sometimes it double triggers, or kind of the previous sustaining note stays somehow on or is double triggered, or I'm not sure what's happening, but so you get some kind of phasing, which is really noticeable in the high frequencies. So that's that's one reason, and then also the Marion Pro synth I'm using, that's also sometimes has problems in the high frequencies. But I use this just because I really like the sound. I can't get this type of kind of airy, still thick but airy, high, what to call it, high synth key sound that I'm using here. I can't get that with any other analog synths than with the Poly-61 and the Marion. Or I haven't tried after. I think after I got those two, I was like, okay, this is what I need. So I just started to use those. But they have some problems in the high frequency. So what I did is I put on this Soothe, because it takes a bit away of the nastiness. So right now, this is what it removes. So it's really like, sorry, my computer can't take the stress. So this is basically what it does. It kind of reduces high frequency nastiness. So after this we go to my mastering chain. I used again some low end focus, and again an equalization. I dipped a bit in 200 and the 600 region, but then I wanted to boost a bit in the mid because I wanted more melody. But then I did a drastic drop. Okay, drastic and drastic. It looks drastic, it's 2 dB. But anyway, I felt that I really had too much high frequencies here, so I had to dip them quite a lot. And again, in the 10K area there was some nastiness, so I wanted to reduce that, mainly during the snare, and because the snare is quite loud, so it really takes away some of the nastiness in the snare in the high frequencies. So after the dynamic EQ, I have again a stereo image widener, slightly widening on the middle, and then I'm reducing everything below 120 Hz to mono, to make it compatible with vinyl. Then I'm using this match EQ that I told you about in the earlier workshops as well. Very little. I mean, it's just using it's just shifting regions with perhaps half a dB minus and plus on the maximum. And what I realized it does, it helps kind of making the whole album sound even more cohesive, like it's actually all the songs belong on the same album. So I felt that was quite a nice touch. And it also helped me kind of finding the problematic areas, but really I'm really using it just to a small extent and not using it at all at the high frequencies, which I had a bit problem with this time. After the match EQ, I'm using a multiband compressor again then and a limiter. So that's how I made my cover of the Top Gun Anthem for my Synthesizer Legends Volume 1 album. If you like this workshop, please check out my channel because there are many other similar type of workshop videos there. And there are also more to come, so remember to subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. Thank you for checking out this video and see you soon. Bye bye.